Holmes. The 1893 World's Fair brought 27 million people into Chicago. Hotels couldn't keep up, so when a charming young pharmacist across the street opened a building with rooms to let, no one cared much about the structure of the building. Certain rooms were built without windows. Hidden gas pipes ran inside the walls, and a passage dropped straight to the basement furnace, where a furnace ran hot enough to leave nothing identifiable behind. Mudgett, by then calling himself Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, had hired a different crew for each section of construction. No single worker ever saw the whole picture. Holmes was not reckless. He carefully planned every scheme, from fake marriages to insurance scams and illegal body sales. When Chicago's economy slumped after the fair, he simply left, moving the con interstate. He was initially arrested for fraud, not murder, after a former cellmate informed the police. Police uncovered that Holmes had killed his business partner and his children, one by one, in different places, while tricking their mother into thinking they were safe. On May 7, 1896, he was taken to a prison courtyard in Philadelphia and hanged before a small group of officials and witnesses away from the public eye. On the gallows, he reportedly told the warden's assistant to take his time. Even after 15 minutes, he was still dying. His final words, spoken just before the execution, were, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer." He demanded his coffin be filled with wet cement, buried deep under a concrete slab. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was abandoned at birth, left to be raised by grandparents who beat her with a belt, locked her out of the house in winter, and threw her out entirely at 15. By then, she was already pregnant, the result of an assault by a neighbor, and already sleeping in abandoned cars. These early experiences left her with severe childhood trauma that shaped her later life. By 1989, she was working Florida's highways. She carried a .22. Between November of that year and November 1990, she shot 7 men. She claimed every single one of them attacked her first. Her first victim, Richard Mallory, genuinely had a prior conviction for attempted rape. The others are harder to verify. What's documented is that she pawned their belongings under false names and drove some of their cars, which is what eventually surfaced her. Police traced one of the pawned items to a transaction receipt. The receipt led them to her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. Moore was offered full immunity in exchange for cooperation. Detectives had her call Wuornos repeatedly while a wiretap ran, not to extract information, but because they already had enough. They needed a confession on record. It worked because Wuornos couldn't let Moore go to prison. She confessed to all 7 murders on a recorded call to protect the one relationship she'd built. That was how she was caught. Not by forensics, not by a witness, but by her own willingness to take the fall for someone she loved. Refused a last meal, asked for black coffee. Her final statement talked about Jesus returning on a spaceship. The press called it proof she'd lost her mind. Her defense attorneys had been arguing that for years. She was executed in October 2002. Peter Kürten. In 1929, Düsseldorf had a problem no one could get a handle on. Victims weren't connected by age, sex, or location. The methods kept changing. Police were hunting what they assumed was a gang, maybe 3 or 4 people working the city. It was one man. He lived quietly. He dressed well. His neighbors liked him. His wife had no idea. Peter Kürten had been cycling through German prisons since his teens, emerging each time with a sharper set of grievances. In Düsseldorf's parks and alleyways, he attacked with hammers, knives, and his hands, switching methods deliberately to keep investigators fractured across multiple case files. When the heat got too close, he set fires across the city to pull police in a different direction. He was caught in May 1930 after a surviving victim identified his building. Kürten had already decided what to do. He sat his wife down, told her everything, and handed her the address where police could find him. She collected the reward money. That had been his plan for her, a financial exit, paid for by turning him in. During his trial, he gave detailed confessions with a composure that disturbed the courtroom. Psychologist Carl Berg interviewed him extensively over months. Before the execution, in one of their final sessions, Kürten turned to Berg and asked, "After my head is removed, will I still be able to hear, for even a moment, the sound of my own blood leaving the stump?" He was guillotined on July 2, 1931. Albert Fish looked like someone's grandfather. Frail build, gray hair, soft voice. The Budd family in New York City had no reason not to trust the gentle old man who came to answer a help-wanted ad in 1928, introduced himself as Frank Howard, and mentioned he was hosting a niece's birthday party. He asked if their 10-year-old daughter, Grace, could come along. She was never seen again. Fish had been moving across 23 states for years, a transient house painter nobody tracked because nobody connected his crimes. He targeted children from poor and working-class families, not because he was careless, but because he calculated those disappearances would receive less attention from police. In most cases, he was correct. In November 1934, he mailed a letter to Grace's mother describing, in explicit detail, what he had done. Detective William King examined the envelope and found a faint embossed mark from the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. A janitor at the relevant rooming house admitted leaving association stationery behind. The landlady provided a name. King intercepted Fish's incoming mail. When Fish arrived at the rooming house to collect it, King arrested him at the door. At trial, defense attorneys submitted pelvic X-rays as evidence of insanity. The images showed at least 29 needles embedded in Fish's body, driven there deliberately over the course of years. The jury found him sane regardless. He was executed at Sing Sing on January 16, 1936. A rumor spread afterward that the metal in his pelvis had short-circuited the electric chair on the first attempt. Prison records don't support it, but the fact that the rumor persisted for decades says something about how badly people needed the universe to have made it harder. Jeffrey Dahmer. The neighbors had complained about the smell from apartment 213 for months. Management came. Nobody called the police. Jeffrey Dahmer worked at a chocolate factory. He was polite, quiet, unremarkable. Between 1978 and 1991, he murdered 17 men and boys, luring them to his apartment, drugging them, and strangling them. He kept skulls in the freezer. He drilled holes into the heads of living victims and injected acid, not to kill them, but in an attempt to make them stay. He built what he called a shrine from their bones. In May 1991, 2 months before his arrest, a 14-year-old named Kürten Synthasamphone was found wandering the street outside Dahmer's building, naked and bleeding, clearly in distress. 2 police officers arrived. Dahmer was calm. He told them Kürten was his adult boyfriend, that they'd been drinking, that this was a domestic dispute, and nothing more. The officers walked Kürten back through the apartment door. Dahmer killed him within hours. When Tracy Edwards finally escaped on July 26, 1991, handcuffs still on one wrist, and flagged down a patrol car, police returned to apartment 213. An officer opened a dresser drawer and found Polaroids. Not photographs, documentation. Dozens of images, staged and labeled, covering every stage. Dahmer confessed almost immediately. He was sentenced to 16 consecutive life terms. 3 years into that sentence, a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver cornered him in the prison gym. Scarver had been watching Dahmer shape his prison food into body part shapes and drizzle ketchup across them, a game he played to unsettle the guards. Scarver used a metal bar from the weight room. Dahmer was 34 years old. He'd been in prison 3 years. Kürten Synthasamphone would have been 26. Zodiac Killer. Every killer in this video identified or confirmed dead. The Zodiac was not. He killed at least 5 people in Northern California. He may have killed more. His own letters claimed 37. He sent those letters to newspapers, taunting, and he included ciphers. He kept score. One message, decoded by a school teacher and her husband within days of publication, spelled out that he killed people because it was fun. He misspelled paradise 3 separate times across different letters. In September 1969, he showed up to an attack at Lake Berryessa wearing a hand-sewn executioner's hood black fabric, square-bottomed. His closest brush with capture came 6 weeks later. After shooting a cab driver in San Francisco, a police dispatcher accidentally broadcast the wrong suspect description. Black male, not white. 2 officers drove past a white man walking calmly away from the scene. They didn't stop him. The Zodiac wrote about it afterward. He confirmed they'd spoken to him briefly. He'd pointed them in the wrong direction and kept walking. His most complex cipher, 340 characters, resisted 51 years of professional cryptanalysis. A volunteer team cracked it in December 2020. The message mocked the police and described collecting slaves for his afterlife. The leading suspect for decades, Arthur Lee Allen, was investigated repeatedly. His handwriting didn't match. A DNA sample from one of the envelopes failed to match Allen as well. Though investigators have disputed the integrity of that sample since, given the handling and storage conditions over 50 years. Allen died in 1992. No charges were ever filed. The case is still open.